Okay. Certain things have absolutely jumped out to me immediately um, concerning this assassination attempt. Okay, my theory, the main foundations of my theory are absolutely true. They're undeniable, but this is an absolute fact. Okay, if we take a deep breath and we consider what's going on here. First of all, we know there's no question, there's no question at all that the Secret Service um, is complicit in this. They were behind this. Anybody that simply has a brain and has been alive for more than 5 minutes knows that preceding any event where the Secret Service is involved, every possible vantage point, every scenario beyond the obvious scenarios are considered the ones we don't even think of. I mean, anything. I mean, I know this from everything from being in the military, from my own experience with firearms, from my own friends and family and people in law enforcement, military, special ops, but just common sense. If you have no background, you know that the Secret Service sends advance teams ahead of any visit of somebody who is a high priority, high security risk. And Trump right now is a higher heightened risk than even the current president, and we know this. Okay, so days in advance, teams they scope out and check out every possible vantage point. They go inside the buildings. They check to make sure things like wiring, security, things have not been tampered with ahead of time, maintenance records. It's very thorough. There's a ton of administrative aspects to security that go far beyond just the guy with the badass looking suit and the backwards cap, tripod, uh, rifle. I mean, when you see that, it's just like when I was in the Air Force. You see an aircraft going through the air. There is a huge team of people like myself and many other people behind that aircraft flying through the air that you don't see, right down from the people that work on the avionics, like myself, to the supply chain that supplied all the parts and the weaponry and everything for that plane. So you're looking at the tip of an iceberg whenever you see the obvious security. So we know for a fact that this was deliberately overlooked and left open on purpose. Access to a roof that was a vantage point with a clear line of sight, well within shooting range of where Donald Trump was standing and giving his speech. That's a given. Don't listen to anything else you hear. That's a given. That was deliberate. They had to do that deliberately. They've been doing this for so long that anybody who wants to assassinate a president or somebody that has that kind of coverage, they're automatically going to be looking for a really exotic way to do it. They're not going to be, I know, let's just go up on the most obvious rooftop with a rifle and shoot at them, and maybe they won't notice. I mean, that's just laughable. It's ridiculous. So the breach in security and allowing access to that rooftop was deliberate, 100% for sure. And people would say, well, why would they do that? They know they get caught. And that's what I'm going to get to when I tell you what I believe was supposed to happen, because this was supposed to be successful. First of all, I don't believe that the bullet that hit the president's ear came from a 20-year-old kid, some sweaty 20-year-old kid whose adrenaline is pumping 100 gallons a minute right on a rooftop. And he has the time to lay down, set up, and take that shot. I can tell you, I had to shoot expert in the military. Um, I was an avionics technician, but everybody in my squadron had to be able to shoot expert because it was a special ops squadron. Shooting expert is fairly easy. You're in a controlled environment. You're sitting there with an M16 and you're in a controlled target environment with plenty of time to line up your shot, breathe. You get more than one chance to shoot at a clearly marked target. Um, Much better shooting situation than what this supposed shooter had to his advantage, okay? But it has to look like it was some crazed kid. So they needed him to be there in place, and they needed people to see the guy on the rooftop and go, hey. Now, what they didn't account for was it was supposed to be successful. So the attention wasn't going to be on all this, and the reason why was what was supposed to transpire from the Biden administration after the successful shot. Okay, but there's always the variable that you can't count on, the factor that there's always a percentage that something could go wrong. The shot that actually hit the president's ear came from a second shooter, and the shot was buried within this kid's wild shots. Whether or not all of his shots were real bullets or some blanks, or they were the stray shots that hit, around and hit and killed and wounded those other people. Here's another fact, okay? Somebody that can shoot that tight of a group, we're talking about Trump just turned his head, which means basically the shot was an expert shot. It doesn't mean it was impossible, but 99.99% of everybody watching this video, you would have missed. Okay, I know this. You would not have been able to nail that shot perfectly, even with a scope. I've got plenty to tell you about scopes and shooting and all the conditions behind this. Okay? First of all, that was an expert shot. Secondly, expert assassins do not squeeze off a whole bunch of rounds. That's why bump stocks are laughable, because they don't kill more people because they're less accurate, because you don't need to be squeezing and having a bunch of recoil going off. Any firearm expert out there is going to agree with me on this. An expert sniper or shooter is basically just going to take that one shot. It's going to be that head. If it's intended to be a headshot, it's going to be the shot that takes him out. And basically what happened was the expert, who was already in a concealed position and had Trump's head lined up for the shot, and the reason they were waiting before they took this kid out was because they needed to hear those shots going off, and it needed to appear that the kid was doing the shooting. You hear a multiple of shots, and a couple of them are a little closer together than the other ones. That's because within that audio camouflage of sound, using a similar or exact same caliber rifle that at least has the same exact audio footprint, within that guy took the one shot and it hit Trump's ear. And they're all waiting because Trump doesn't look like his head exploded. He didn't go down. And then, of course, they had to take the kid out because they don't need this kid talking. They don't need to discover more about this kid because they have to create this kid. They have to create his background. Within a second, you can create a fake media account, backgrounds, and all this kind of stuff. So he's out with a headshot. Boom. Okay, you see the team on the roof, and they are looking in that direction. The guy who took out the supposed shooter did not have to go like, whoa, where that's coming from, right? That means he was lined up on the guy, and you can see it. And they inexplicably, they watched and they waited until the kid was able to fire off those camouflage rounds so that the real assassin, who we don't know who it is, who was a government asset, for sure, there's no question about that, took that shot. But because of God, and I'm absolutely convinced of this, if you watch, Trump said, I'm going off script here, and is what he did, and then he turns his head, and he turns his head at just the wrong time. There is a delay between when you squeeze a trigger and the bullet actually finds its mark. So there's always that element. The best assassins in the world with the perfect lined up shot, with a spotter and calculating windage, still miss. No assassin is 100% because there's always a variable. There's the variables of wind, of movement of your target, and that timing has to be perfect. And there's one and only one who can definitely slip in there and just go, bat. Sorry, Trump, turn your head just enough, just enough. So that kid, there's no way he was able to get his groupings as a shooter were certainly not tight enough to get it clear down to almost dead perfect accurate. From what I'm hearing, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 yards. Okay, that is in shooters terms, that's not an impossible shot to hit within a grouping like that. It is an impossibility for some 20-year-old kid who I guarantee you, he's not a trained military assassin. Even if he was an expert shot, technically, there's a lot more to it than that. You can't have your adrenaline pumping like crazy. You can't be all excitable. To give you an example, with a 30-06, I am deadly accurate. Like I can put a 30-06 round with peep sights exactly where I want it. And yet, like when I was in high school hunting, I missed a deer that was big and right in front of me. Why? Because of the adrenaline, the excitement. And the thing of it is I could have, if I was calm and collected, I mean, I could have easily just pulled up, lined up the shot, and it would have been almost impossible to miss. Okay, you multiply that kind of adrenaline and excitement and apply it to, or through the prism of a 20-year-old kid who I can't even imagine. He's either mentally ill, they've got him on some kind of drugs. There's a number of things going on here, but this is not a calm, cool, collected person who could line up a shot within the time it would take and climb up on a roof, the most obvious vantage point to assassinate somebody from, right? So, we know that this was deliberately left open. Anybody who questions this is just an idiot. Don't even bother arguing with me because you're just stupid, okay? No, this was deliberate. This was obvious. This is not tinfoil hat anything. Okay, they like I said, advanced teams go out. They break things down to such a degree that if from when they set the team out to when the event takes place, the place is secured and watched from that point on. That's how that works. They don't go and go, well, this all looks safe, and then leave. And then Larry, the cable guy, comes and works on that same building to install a wire or something like that. No, I mean, everything is accounted for down to the very last, finest little detail. Okay. And even the argument where they say, the Secret Service, they've been asking for, more Secret Service detail, and so they were stretched too thin and they were exhausted. That doesn't matter. It's just like in my world of aircraft maintenance in the Air Force. You cannot let things slip. You can't sign off an aircraft and be like, geez, I'm just too tired, and the crew chief's going to go, oh, okay, it's good to fly. It's like, no, the aircraft will be grounded. And this is not the high stakes of a person where there are real active players out there that really do potentially have hostile intent to take out a target, like a president or a presidential candidate. This is like an aircraft in the Air Force when we're in peacetime. Okay, so the Secret Service, I guarantee you, is hyper anal beyond anything I've experienced. And I know what it's like at a special ops level in just a regular non-combat operation, to give you an example. Okay, so no, they didn't. It wasn't like, oh, we don't have enough Secret Service people. Gosh, I wish we had more people. We could have covered that roof and that roof, but we just had to let them go because, no, everything comes to a screeching halt. This is all heavily, heavily regulated right down to the last little detail. That's how classification and security works within a military type situation, and the Secret Service is like military on steroids. Normally, every person in the Secret Service is hyper qualified. They're not like these gangling chicks that were running around and ducking behind Trump that you saw. This is deliberate. This is the Secret Service, and the Secret Service is answerable to the executive branch, if I'm not mistaken, the administration, the Biden administration. Okay? I know I can anticipate the questions that are going to come up, and I'm going to deal with each one of them. I already have, for the most part. As far as people would say, yeah, but if they were going to do something that obvious, which it appears they did, which we know they did, right? Because there was apparently a ladder anywhere near a building that was a vantage point that was a perfect shot to get at the president. Okay. people who are smart are going to think ahead of that, and they're going to think, yeah, but then they'd have to answer for that. Well, but they wouldn't if it had gone according to plan and Trump had not turned his head, and this is why. If he had been taken out by a headshot, gauging the current landscape in the country, as far as the deep divisions, the emotions that are running really high, and everybody. I mean, they've been caught with their pants down. This whole thing with Biden is so exposed now. There is so many people about to be exposed because of Trump has what they call now the receipts. I hate using the latest lingo, but he has the receipts on everybody. And I think he has a lot of the info that they were hoping would go away with Jeffrey Epstein, etc. Because people are panicking. I mean, the lawsuits and the charges against Trump, no sane person who knows anything about the law or the Constitution would ever say any of that was even remotely legal or justified. So a lot of us were worrying. Like, I'm surprised a lot of us had been saying that nobody's really attempted to take him out yet. And Dan Bongino, who is a former Secret Service guy and still talks to his friends in the Secret Service, has been saying for a long time, yeah, they're really worried. There's a heightened alert. The way they rate the levels within the Secret Service, because he is a former Secret Service officer, you know, Trump was at the highest category when it comes to a danger or a threat level. So that even makes it, if it wasn't already impossible, which it was, now it's hyper impossible on steroids 2.0 that they would overlook any vantage point with a clear line of sight to the president. So we know that was no question. Okay, we witnessed them make that obvious move. Now, to address the next logical question, which is, but if they did that, it would be so obvious, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that was dependent 100% on one thing that they were counting on, and that's that expert marksman, the guy who actually took the shot that hit the ear, because you don't think they would compromise and expose themselves and take this big of a risk, hoping that some 20-year-old basement nerd might be able to pull off a headshot to the president in the presence of so-called Secret Service, of whom we don't know who is and is not compromised. Okay, they're not going to do that. They're going to have insurance. They're going to have a guy somewhere. There's somebody who took that shot from a concealed position. And when you look at, and there's a reason the media is not showing, if you've ever noticed, they're not showing the vantage, they're not showing camera angles. Like when they're interviewing a witness saying, you know, yeah, he's over here on this rooftop, and they're pointing, and the cameramen deliberately aren't pointing over. They're not showing, they don't want you to see, like from the point of view of the president or the stage, they don't want you to see, like, whoa, that's right there. Why would they not cover that? They don't want that. But see, what was supposed to be happening right now was there was going to be what they call a false flag type of a situation where probably actors, probably some kind of agitators were supposed to look like they're coming unhinged. People were going to go out because if Trump would have got a headshot, you would be seeing massive protests. There would be people showing up in cities. That's when they stoke these situations like they tried to with January 6th to make it a big event. And guess what? President Biden, unfortunately, hates to do this, but he's going to have to declare martial law. And if he declared martial law, you wouldn't have been able to hear from these witnesses. And it would have been so obfuscated if any of those interviews came through. They can, under martial law, they can shut down everything. Shut down the internet, shut down the news, tell people curfews, got to stay inside, suspend elections. This is not the first time the theory of martial law being called under a certain set of scenarios has been brought up and opined about quite a bit from a lot of people with some fairly good expertise, and myself actually included. Not that I have great expertise, but I've postulated the same thing many times. Like they're desperate, and we know that it's life or death for a very powerful element in this country to make sure that Donald Trump does not get back into the White House. We know that. The bizarre insane lawsuits and you know what, 30 some felonies that are completely fake, that charges that weren't brought up 18 years before. So I mean, we know now, we see that, we see the corruption, we see the corrupt judges, um, we see the corrupt pundits, we see the ones who fold when it looks like Trump is gaining up steam. All of these conservatives I used to like, they're dropping off like flies one at a time, you know. People you thought you trusted, think about it, like Glenn Beck, you know. Well, I can find you footage of Glenn Beck comparing Trump to Hitler. And the media, this comparison to Hitler, and in social media, people are actually saying he needs to be, you know, now if you're immune from charges as a president, then you should assassinate Trump. This stuff's out there, and it was all set up, and it was all supposed to be like right now we're supposed to be under martial law. So all that information that we, thank you Jesus, have now, that the Secret Service deliberately set the president up, it would have been completely obfuscated. The president was all set to come out and declare martial law. When that happens, even what's not legal under martial law, from a lawless administration, they would have shut everything down. And they can shut our internet off easy. Like it's a closed circuit already. It's already impossible to get out of the big tech bubble to find a lot of information, which is why I always recommend to everybody, if you don't have a screen recorder type software on your computer, you should get it. And if otherwise, you need to film with any kind of camera you have, and you should download to offline sources every bit of information you get, always, because I have tons of stuff, and you put it in zip drives, thumb drives, and you put it wherever, in places that it can't be found, because hard information is regularly purged from the internet. It's very much like the 1984 scenario. So basically, these are the things that I'm 100% true that, as far as my theory goes, are established fact. You know, first of all, that kid was deliberately allowed to get up there and be very visible and fire off guns, and he was an expendable resource to these people, however they did it. They waited for him to fire off enough shots and waiting to see if Trump was going down or not. That's why they waited, because they kept thinking, they knew they have an expert asset out there that's focused, and once they saw Trump do this and then go down, they were hoping, okay, take him out now, you know, and they took the kid out. And I'm sure there's so many people right now that are just horrified, and were just horrified when they saw Trump get back up and go fight. That was divine intervention, folks. That was God intervening. That's God basically saying he's given America, he's given us another chance. I believe we're in the end times, but I believe that God is giving us some grace and mercy. I believe that because of our prayers and faith. And I believe, you know, as God has always used imperfect people, the biggest heroes in the Bible were some of the most horrible characters otherwise. So I believe he's using Donald Trump in this time. And this is a chance for America to redeem itself. I don't know how long that's going to last. Knowing Americans and their attention span, which is about that of a gnat, even this, Trump gets back in, we become energy independent, and we a lot of things get changed in time. Americans are not smart enough to hang on. Like 2-4 years from then, they'll stick a Gavin Newsom in or something, because if God is not your grounding in all this, being a conservative is not enough. You know, you can't go back to prioritizing your football teams and stuff like that. You have to always be taking a fight to the enemy on a constant basis. So, this was a plan that was in the works for a while. It was orchestrated perfectly. True patriots and Americans have had it, and are ready, like Civil War. I know people that are saying, you know, if anybody says this or that to me about Trump, I mean, I'm laying him out, and I get it. I feel that. And that was the plan. And if he would have been taken out, if he would have actually, if he had not moved his head, just that extra millimeter, which saved him from being dead, if he had not done that, then right now we would be in a completely different situation orchestrated by the dark figures whose names we don't know. Okay, they're the ones that are really pulling the strings behind the scene. But there's, the probabilities, the odds of a shot actually hitting the ear means that somebody was an expert shot. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I could hit it, target it, 150 yards, whatever," and it's like, yeah, you could, but take my AR-15 right now, and like go climb up on a building, with all the adrenaline pumping and everything else, and try to sink that round right into a target about this size from 150 yards. Okay, you're gonna miss. I'm gonna miss. I'm a good shot. Okay, I'm definitely not gonna hit anything if I squeeze off a whole bunch of shots. That's why there was a guy there waiting, and he was waiting to hear, and they allowed him to get up there. It was a camouflage. It was an audio camouflage. Pop, 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 right? Within there's an uneven shot mixed in there that was the shot that actually was intended to only be one shot, which is all a true sniper will need, is boom, takes him out, it's got him in the scope, sees that he got him, and he did get him. See, the thing of it is people say he attempted to shoot Donald Trump. Trump was shot. The target was hit. Okay? It's a distance of however you want to angle it, from to like the artery or into the skull or the brain, from where it actually hit was just the distance basically that Donald Trump moved his head, right? That was the difference between life and death, and that timing was perfect. That shot was perfect, except for God had something else in mind. Okay, so think about it. Obviously, there's a conspiracy here. Obviously, this was a coordinated attack. This was planned out. The timing was too perfect. You can just eliminate the possibility that it was somehow overlooked, that some stupid 20-year-old kid could climb up on a roof and pull off that shot. Okay, we know you can eliminate that. We know that anybody that's going to go through this much risk and planning for one of the biggest events that would have been in human history, we know for a fact that they're not going to plan everything expertly like that. Do the DEI hiring of the Secret Service, Three Stooges chicks running around ducking and stuff. Okay, they're not going to go through that much trouble and then leave the kill shot, that element of chance, in the hands of a 20-year-old kid. We know that. There's a second shooter. I guarantee you there's a second shooter. But he missed. And now I guarantee you everybody within the Trump organization is hyper, like hyper vetting every single person around them. And the bad players, the people, the perpetrators, they've got to be in hiding right now. There are so many people right now probably screaming at each other, and you can watch for people to start turning on each other very soon, because the hammer's coming down, and this is mob mentality, this is organized crime. So what's going to happen is people are going to start getting offered deals behind closed doors. There are people, I believe, buried well within all these organizations. There are good guys in the inside too, and I think the jig is up, and they realize it. And this was the one chance I believe that they had, and they blew it. Actually, they didn't. They executed it perfectly. But if God ain't going to let it happen, then you're not going to win against God. So just seriously consider all those things. Could that kid have pulled off a shot that was like that? No, he wouldn't have. Is it a random possibility he could have? Yes, but would they have left that to a random possibility? When they showed their intentions by allowing the most egregious security breach ever. And look at the press conference that they had afterwards, the law enforcement, where they said, the guy, I don't remember who he is, and he says, it's my understanding that that rooftop was outside of the security perimeter. Okay, my mom is 91 years old. She's in a nursing facility, and she's a smart person, but she's her memory is not what it used to be. I could go to my mother in a nursing home and say, Mom, let's just say you're protecting a president or somebody, and you could set up some like little toy houses in front of her and set the scene up, and you say you got a certain amount of people. How would you go about protecting him? I'm not being facetious at all here. I mean, any person would go, well, I'd go ahead of time and make sure nobody can get up on these rooftops here where they could shoot. I mean, it's not even feasible. Like, don't even take anybody seriously who's gonna suggest that anything was overlooked here. Don't even entertain that possibility. And one of the first things I said on social media was, I said, look for the term lone wolf to be repeated in the coming hours and days. And the next thing you know, I pulled up that press briefing, and some guy with a foreign accent, anxiously, first question that came out: do you think this person was a lone wolf? Lone wolf, because they want it. They're praying to their God down below that somehow people are going to buy this whole lone wolf thing. And that's why they had to kill him. He was an expendable resource. He was just another whatever, some Antifa kid or whatever. You got enough. These people on the left, they're insane. They don't have any brains, and it was probably really easy to recruit somebody. Just hey man, you're going to be in on this special thing, and they're Antifa or that type, BLM, Antifa, whatever it is. So that was easy enough to find somebody who's going to go down in glory or whatever, and some person that he's gonna look like an unhinged character, and there's going to be a lot of really weird things you're going to see come out about this guy. You're going to see some conflicting stuff. So right now is when you need to be hyper focused. Like, everybody needs to seriously be watching, particularly on the mainstream media and off. And when you see things like on X, you need to grab them, take screenshots, and save it and become your own sleuth, which is what I've done for years and years now. And you'll start seeing these obvious contradictions. You'll see people reversing themselves. You start to see, it's easy to start making the connections on who's connected to who and who has how big of a stake in what. And they had to get rid of him. They had to get rid of Trump. And I am kind of relieved that it finally happened, because it was like, it was kind of like this thing was pregnant. I always felt like this thing was pregnant. Like they're gonna put all their eggs in that one basket or whatever. At some point, we're gonna see something big pop. And I said it on social media in the past. I kept saying something really big's gonna happen. Something like is gonna blow your mind. And I was worried because I hadn't seen that big Hail Mary yet, and that was the big Hail Mary. I don't believe they have a good contingency plan. I believe that was their plan B. That was like, okay, we've gone to these different levels, and then the last resort is, okay, we got to take him out. And the decision was made, we have to take him out. And especially now, especially after they let Biden go out, and they purposely let themselves be exposed that, yeah, this has been a conspiracy all along. There are people in the left and in the media now that are coming out and saying, yeah, 4 years ago, I knew he was crazy. And people are like, well, why don't you say anything? And they're all turning on each other. If you notice, there's a big knife fight going on in the left. So they turn around, they say, okay, well, let's let that be exposed and get the attention on it, rile up the people, and get them primed to hopefully do what we tried to convince everybody happened on January 6th, which now we know was not what happened. And people are getting so much smarter now. So we have to have that extreme. Right in front of everybody, he has to get shot. And if people would have been protesting, people would have gone insane over this. There's no question. And that is exactly when this administration was going to do all the stuff that us so-called tinfoil hat wearing crazy people have been saying all along. He would have called martial law. And he would have been the nicest guy. And, well, I understand, people are upset. And, and legislation, emergency legislation would have been passed. And this, because the pandemic thing, they've taken that for a couple test runs. And they've felt the pulse. And, like, everybody's saying, like, you ain't going to fool me a second time. Like, they didn't fool me the first time. But everybody else I know is like, I will never do that again. I will never allow them to force. I think the latest one was a measles outbreak, pandemic or whatever. They've been floating that. And they can sense that people are ready to resist. So what do? When that's inevitable, you take your situation and you take the inevitable elements in warfare thinking and strategy, and you have to marshal them in sort of like a judo type way and use their own force against them. And this would have been inducing that sort of a reaction with all the right camera angles and all that kind of a thing, and then impose martial law. And in the end, somebody knows their time is short. And so you're going to see some probably really crazy things in the next 5 months, right? But they're going to be like what we call in mental health extinction bursts. They're going to be more like on the tantrum level, but not coordinated and not effective. This had all the elements to be that last effective push. And but what it ended up being was the left just committed suicide in front of the whole world. And mark my words, we'll see if I'm right or wrong. But I know I'm right about this was set up. Trump was supposed to get hit, and they had more going on than that kid. They had more going on than that kid. It's the only thing that could ever make any sense. If you're interested, if you you can go ahead and post on what you think. I've got a broken arm here. I can barely type. So this isn't going to be a real sophisticated video, but like, share, and subscribe to the Man Cave News Network, and get a lot of popcorn. And I can't even operate my mouse here with my left hand. This is terrible. I'm about as effective to get off a headshot the way I am right now with my arm in a sling as that 20-year-old kid was. But they also made it very close so that they could definitely promote the narrative of a shot so easy a 20-year-old kid could make it if he fires off enough shots. That's why they made it an obvious close one. And then they had the narrative was going to be that there was a breakdown of communication, et cetera, and that allowed a kid to get at such a good vantage point. But if you question every element of that, none of that flies. But it would have been obfuscated by the absolute chaos that's supposed to be going on right now, because we're supposed to have martial law. And of course they knew people were going to ignore martial law. And then all hell breaks loose. And before you know it, within a day or two, we're not even talking about rooftops and the secret security. But unfortunately for them, we have everything right in front of us, and more is coming out like every day. It's kind of mind-boggling, really. So anyway, stay tuned. It's only going to get more interesting.